Hi everybody, and thanks for joining us today, and thanks for the intro, Michelle. It's lovely to be working with Iconic again. I'd just like to warn everyone before I start that I do have a co-host here today, and it's a small furry dog, so I'm hoping he doesn't start barking at anything during the presentation. But if you do see him pop up on the couch there behind me, don't be surprised. So we'll get started now with that bit of housekeeping over. So my name is Deanna O'Connor, and I'm a freelance journalist, editor, content creator / whatever. And I also run the Speak Up Club, which was originally set up to empower women in business with more confidence in public speaking. So today I'm going to give you a taster of something that I've developed from coaching people in public speaking, and it's a method I've called the Elastic Speaker Method. So what the Elastic Speaker Method is something that will enable you to be more resilient, to stretch yourself, and to bounce back from any little issues that might arise when you're public speaking. And I think what most people really fear, if you kind of talk about what are top of your fears around public speaking, is freezing on stage. That is the number one thing that is the stuff of nightmares. So I think by using this technique, you can really become quite confident that that's not going to happen to you. And if you do lose your train of thought, that you'll be able to bounce back like a string of elastic, hopefully. So after today, it's a very simple method. And really, this is just a taster to introduce you to it. You should go away understanding how to do it, but it's something I would train people in and kind of make them sweat practicing. So really today, I can't in a webinar do that with you, but you'll have the tools if you want to go away and do it yourself. Maybe a friend can help you, or I'm available for Zoom coaching one-on-one if anybody wants to do that. So the first thing that I would advise you to do is to start building up your bounce, and that's your resilience, and that's your power to kind of snap back. So a really good way to do this, and something that a lot of more businesses nowadays are actually taking note of and using in team building and creativity, and it's really, really powerful for team presentations, especially for teams to do this together, is to use the improv techniques from comedy improv, dramatic improv. And if I think most of you are probably Dublin based, and if anybody actually is interested in doing an improv class, when they happen again, I trained with an amazing company called Flying Turtle Productions in improv, and they do brilliant improv classes. So I'd highly recommend them. But you can do little practices yourselves. So they'll help you thinking on your feet, engaging with other people, being in the moment, and coping with the unexpected. And the way it does this is that when you're doing improv, you have to listen to the other person. You have to be ready to react to what they say constantly. You don't know what to expect. And sometimes in a public speaking kind of situation, or in a meeting where you're presenting maybe to clients or doing a pitch, you're going to get those situations where you're asked a question that floors you, and helping kind of get this resilience behind you that just teaches you to kind of react quickly in the moment, and kind of read the room and what other people are thinking and saying, and really actively listening to them as well. All of this is stuff you can learn from doing improv practice. So you're building these talents up in yourself, but then you're just applying them in a different way to business. Improv has been described as the 21st century technology because it enables you to be flexible, to be adaptable, to spot opportunities, and to let go of what isn't working. That last piece, the letting go of what isn't working, is if you're doing an improv scene with someone and it's kind of tanking and it's not really funny anymore, you have to turn things around, you have to pivot very quickly. So as you can see, there's all these kind of jargon and buzzwords like pivoting and turning it around that really do apply to other areas of your life and other areas of work and business. So I'm absolutely evangelical about improv. I think it's just such a great tool to have in your skill set, and also brilliant fun. And if you are in any way nervous kind of person, it really brings you out of yourself doing it as well. So little practices you could do just at home with your family or friends or work colleagues if you wanted to kind of try and practice it a little bit together, because I don't know what the situation is with actually doing classes in a group setting right now, but these are some really easy little tools you can do. So one of the ones that we started off with in improv class was a story circle, and this is super easy. So it's a very gentle kind of way to move into this without any stress or pressure. What you would do is say it's a one-word story circle. I say a word, next person says a word, next person says a word, and you go around in a circle until you have a story. So everyone's just adding a little piece to it. And one word is very simple. Now you can build up, you can do a whole sentence. Or you can just do something with one person, which is kind of the yes and game or the last word spoken game. So for these ones, yes and is kind of building on what the other person says. If I said, let's go to the beach, you'd go, yes, and let's bring a picnic. And that's a silly example, but you could do this in a business sense where you say, let's create a new app. And then the next person go, yes, and let's put this functionality in and build, build, build. So it's just a real exercise in blue sky thinking, but also reacting positively to other people. And if you react positively to what someone says, you really engage with them. So if you're in a meeting where maybe, you know, there's a bit of kind of, you're not sure if they're really on your side, you want to kind of get in a good kind of working relationship with people, being positive to what they say is a really good way to kind of build a good working relationship with them. And in the last webinar we did a piece on how to get what you want in meetings, and a key part of that is actually very positive engagement with people. And there's my co-host there, my little dog popping up in the couch. So anyway, yes and is brilliant for creating that positive engagement with people, and whether that's with your clients, with people in a meeting, your work colleagues in a presentation, or an audience if it's in a more kind of public setting. Another game then to really practice active listening is last word spoken. So it's kind of like the yes and, but someone says something and then you have to say another sentence starting with the last word they said. So it just keeps your brain kind of focused on what other people are saying. And it's really important in a meeting setting especially to be actively listening and not kind of thinking too much about what the next thing you're going to say is, because then you can miss out on a lot of important things that other people were saying and opportunities to engage with them and really build that really good working relationship. So the last two little improv tests you can set yourself if you want to practice them are 2-minute talks. Now 2 minutes seems like pretty short amount of time when you start, but actually if you get up and do it in front of a room full of people, and this is what I make people do in workshops, they freak out. I have had to barter people down to get up and talk for 30 seconds because they have so much fear of getting up and genuinely do freeze and find it very hard to speak for that amount of time. But what I would do is always get people to start on something that's really easy to talk about. So it might be my worst haircut, my first car, how I boil an egg. It can be a very personal experience. And if you can build up the amount of time that you can ad lib on a subject matter, just pure waffle, it'll kind of stand to you to know that you can. And then, you know, when you go to talk about something in a work-related sense, obviously you're going to talk about stuff that you really have deep expert kind of matter in. So expert knowledge in, sorry, I'm losing my words here. So then the kind of higher level 2-minute talk to work on after you've kind of mastered the easy ones like how to boil an egg or whatever, is to get into more topical current affairs things. So maybe, you know, if you're working in pairs or doing this, you could give a headline from the day's paper or pretend you're a panelist on a current affairs program. So you've been asked to comment on something. Things like that will build up your ability to do this, because there may be instances where you get invited on a radio show to talk about things or a panel. And you know, it's good to be prepared to talk about any subject matter that has been in the papers that day that is maybe relevant to your topic, but not exactly what you came on to talk about. So you're always kind of ready for things that you weren't expecting. So doing this improv practice, it just gives you a great kind of grounding and background. But really, it's not the key thing to this elastic speaker method. And the elastic speaker method is very simple. I just had a little slide here, sorry, on, I think I already covered this, was about doing team presentations. So all of those improv things will build into this and be very helpful with it. So as I mentioned, the team presentation thing, if you work together on some improv exercises prior to doing a team presentation, you have great rapport, it's team building, it helps you with storytelling because you're trying to create a story on the hoof. And that in turn increases your creativity. So this really is the key to the elastic speaker method, and it's parachuting practice, which sounds fun, but believe me, in practice, it's hard work, but it has really yielded fantastic results. So what is parachuting? It's flying by the seat of your pants, but safely, and then getting used to landing on your feet. So you're going to laugh when I tell you this technique because it actually is so ridiculously simple. But the key to it is, unfortunately, going away and doing the hard work and practicing. Unfortunately, it's like physio. They're not going to fix things. They just give you a set of exercises to go away and do at home. And that's basically, this is physio for your public speaking. So what I say to do in this kind of elastic speaker method is get your speech written, work on your story arc, get all of that stuff done. Get it onto cue cards, because you're not going to be reading it off your slides. You're not going to be reading it off a sheet of paper. You're going to have it in your head. You're going to know it so well by the time we're finished with this that you could literally take any cue card, look at a keyword, and talk about it. So ideally, maybe at the end, once you've done this, you might even be ready and confident to go without cue cards, which is the ideal situation. But it is helpful to have something just to kind of remind you, just in case sometimes. So what I would say is always number your cue cards. For actual public speaking events, I tend to use ones that are on a ring binder so that they flip. And if I do drop them, then they're not going to go everywhere. But for practice, use loose ones. We number them, we shuffle them, we draw a random one, and we just parachute in to that part in the speech. So you're getting used to picking up anywhere in the speech at all and just going from there. So this means that if you are prone to kind of losing, your train of thought or going off on a tangent, or if people are going to ask questions during it, and especially for presentations and work, this is important because there may be engagement during the presentation or a pitch as well, that you know how to hop back in and don't get too flustered when you hop back in. So once you have your little reminders on your cue cards, you can look and you can parachute in at any point. And this is really, really so helpful in not freezing up, because I think getting lost is how people freeze. And there's, obviously nerves and things as well. And we deal with those in other ways, and we've covered in other webinars, which you can watch on Iconic's YouTube channel. So there's a lot there around calming as well. But the confidence of knowing that you know your topic inside out, the order your speech goes in inside out, but that you are very comfortable with going out of that order. And if you shuffled your cards, you could almost give your speech in the wrong order, so that you'll be able to literally jump in at any point and go from there. And that is essentially the key to the elastic speaker method. And it's very hard to just convince you in words, but I guarantee you, if you had a speech to do and I spent an hour with you, making you absolutely sweat, rehearsing it with me, you would understand how powerful it is that you can just work it from any angle, and one word can set it off and you're ready to go. So it really, really is. Rehearsal is so important. And anyone who thinks they can just wing it in an important speech, some people can, and that's great. But it really, if you're kind of starting from a place of nerves or fear around public speaking, it's something you can build up. And I truly believe that anyone can be good at it and anyone can improve their skills at it, so that you can get to the point where maybe you don't need to rehearse your speech so much. Maybe you've given this speech at 20 conferences and you have it like in there so deeply that you can just go without rehearsing. But definitely it's something you can learn, and this method will bring you there. So just to recap there, get your speech written, get it down into bullet points, get your bullet points on cue cards, shuffle them up, draw them at random, jump into your speech from any point in the speech that comes out, and then you've learned how to parachute into it and land on your feet and think quickly to get started from that point. So if you're interrupted, if you freeze, you know that you are able to carry on. And then at the end, you're allowed to put your cue cards back in order and do one final rehearsal. So it's that simple. It is ridiculously easy in theory, not so easy in practice. But I hope that if any of you do have something that you need to do, that you will just at least take that one thing away, is that don't go into it cold, do practice it, because even when you're writing, I hate speech writing personally, and anytime I've done it, I always have to read it out loud because my style of writing might get a bit formal when I'm writing sometimes, and then when you say it, it's like it doesn't sound right. It wouldn't come out of that person's mouth that way. It's not kind of idiomatic. You have to just read it out loud and do that vocal practice. So another little thing I want to touch on in this, because the elastic speaker method is so simple in theory. I didn't have 30 minutes to talk about that. I would definitely have to train someone in it to demonstrate, but I didn't know if anyone would be up for that today. So we will just touch on this other topic that I wanted to give you some information on, which is coping strategies for tough questions. And I think this really speaks to the resilience element as well, and that bouncing back, because you just don't know when you're going to get the tough question. I think if you're trying to sell something to a client, if you're pitching to an investor, they have to give you tough questions. They have to ask everything they need to know, but hopefully in those instances you have the answers. And occasionally you may come across someone who's just being negative because they're maybe a rival or have a rival viewpoint or an opposing viewpoint. So there are a few strategies that might be helpful to some of you depending on what your line of work is, and I'll go through a few of those. So again, it all comes down to being prepared. I'll always go back to this. So, if you are maybe touching on a topic that there are opposing viewpoints to, you don't have to agree with them, but you do have to know them. So have a think about what any opposition could be. I mean, if you're in the medical industry, you might have people who are anti-vaccinations, for instance. So that's a very, very obvious one. You can think about what their viewpoints are and how to counter those. So list possible questions, list things that could come back at you. And if you're having trouble kind of trying to think of them yourself because you're so immersed in your world and your viewpoint on it, give it to your mother, father, sister, brother, friend, colleague, whoever, and ask them to say, well, what would you ask? What would you be asking me? And especially if you wanted to kind of make me uncomfortable, what would you ask me? So try and get those questions in advance. Try and cover all those bases. Try and see it from the other sides. And then you'll be much more prepared. So one thing I would say is really helpful to do if you are just, when you get a tough question, is buy yourself some time. If someone says to you something really tricky to answer, just, especially in a big room, you can be, I'm sorry, I just want to clarify that I heard that properly. Did you just say blah, 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 blah? So repeat the question back to them. And as you're repeating it back to them, you're clarifying in your own head what they've said and giving yourself a bit of time to try and formulate that answer. So dodging tactics. I shouldn't really be teaching you these, but sometimes you will need them. So I'm going to give them to you. So rephrasing the question is a good one. And you can sort of slyly rephrase a question in a way that makes it a slightly different question. So if someone says to you, why are you implementing this new strategy that none of the employees agree with? You can kind of go, so why are we implementing this new strategy? Well, let's look at all the things that led up to us creating a new strategy. So you're sort of answering their question, but not really, because what they're asking you is, why are you doing this thing? No one wants you to do this thing. But what you're answering is, why did we create this thing? What made us kind of think about doing it? So slightly twisting their question a little bit. It's very political, but it can just help you smooth things along. Another thing to do is, let's look at the bigger picture here. So if someone asks a real nitpicky question and they're kind of getting on your case about something that isn't really key or important, it's very niggly, move it up to the bigger picture. Try and be the bigger person. Try and talk about the benefits to society at large rather than like one little number that's, niggly things. So looking at what is more beneficial, what is more creative, more innovative, any of those things that you can pull out can really help to kind of deflect focus from questions that are really focusing on small details that might not be as important, or maybe they are, but you just don't want to answer that question right then. Another thing then is to kind of, again, rather than going bigger and more blue sky on it, you can kind of drill down a bit more. So if someone asks you a question, you can sort of say, look, I want to answer that fully, and in order to do that, I really want to clarify and sort of you can go either into the background more or greater detail. So these sound kind of a little bit slimy, I suppose, in some ways, to say they're dodging tactics, but there's a lot of instances where you can use them to really kind of clarify the situation and, you know, use these powers for good, not for evil, let's just say. Then another, just having trouble now moving my slide along. Hang on. I think my screen sharing has just paused. I need to resume share. So could everybody see that okay? So another thing that some people have had problems with is a question where they really get a direct comparison to their competitors. And especially in a pitching situation. So this can be, you know, what makes you better? What's your USP? Why should we choose you over your competitor? And I got this little trick from a friend who's CEO of a startup who did a lot of pitching in Silicon Valley. And she said that what they were taught by their kind of pitch coaches was to use the word unlike. And once you say, unlike our competitors, we are bigger, better, bolder, whatever, it doesn't really matter what you say after unlike, but once you use the word unlike our competitors or unlike other companies in this sector, you are differentiating yourself from them, and that will stay with the people who are listening. So that is a really good, just one word can make such a difference. But rather than going, well, we've been working on, just go in a very confident voice, unlike our competitors, and you've instantly sounded confident and differentiated yourself. So that one word is a magical word to use in a lot of situations. And another thing that I'd always recommend is if someone comes at you with a tricky question that involves facts, figures, percentages, reporting, statistics, whatever, and you don't have them to hand, or you're not 100% sure that you have the right one, I would always say, I want to give you the right facts and figures on this, and I'm going to get back to you later with them. So please come up to me afterwards, give me your card, let's swap contact details, and I will follow up with you. It shows honesty, you're not bluffing, you have the full information and you want to give them a fuller report. And if that person is really interested, you know, they'll appreciate that. And it's also giving you a chance to make a contact, swap cards, get in touch with this person who could end up being a valuable client or collaborator. So I think that being honest and actually making a contact is a really good way to not answer a question, and it could lead to better things as well. So if someone is being very negative to you, I would always say, kill them with kindness, take the high road on it, don't escalate the situation, and say to them that you'd love to hear more of their opinion, especially if you actually wouldn't right then in that situation and you really want to shut them up, but tell them that you would and say, look, let's meet afterwards, let's discuss this, let's have a coffee. I'd love to hear so much more about it that we don't have time for it now, and swiftly move it on. And that's a very clean and compassionate way to deal with negativity in that situation. And also, you know, learning those opposing views can be very helpful. It'll give you ammunition to better your product, better your pitch, see what's wrong with it, see what people don't agree with. It can be so valuable to hear those opposing views that definitely meet them for that coffee, find out all their opposing views, but don't let them say all the opposing views in a public situation where they're putting doubt into other people's minds who you want to be listening to you. So I would say definitely take the stuff on board, but try and do it in a separate room, a separate place, and a later date. So that is a very quick run through of some of the Elastic Speaker method. And if anybody does have any questions, I will be delighted to meet you for coffee and a separate date. I'm only joking. You can ask me questions now. I think we'll have plenty of time because I've done a very quick taster today. But I'd be delighted to talk to anyone again if they want to get in touch. There are all my details there on that last slide.